Hi, it's Emma, and today I'll be making applesauce as it calls for in Choir page 325, and then I'll be making applesauce with pears. And I think the applesauce with pears will be a slightly different color and a mushier texture because pears are generally mushier, and if you add pears, it'll be a slightly different color than the apples. And I also think you'll get a more pear-like flavor. And then I will also be making apple wedges as called for in the recipe. I will be adding a version with the brown sugar coming after cooking. And that is, I think those ones will not be as mushier, those ones will be mushier and not as firm because the brown sugar helps keep it firm and prevent mushiness. Just like the tomato sauce that I made last week, applesauce is also a puree. And the ingredients I will be using today are Countryside Creamery unsalted butter, Stone Mill iodized table salt. I don't have the container for the cinnamon, nor do I have the bag for the pears, and just Baker's Corner light brown sugar, and then the apples are Honey Crisp. Now I have just cut, peeled, and cored 5 of the apples. Put it on cook the apples on a saucepan. So right now I just have the apples on medium heat, and I put 3 tablespoons of water in there with the apples. And now I will wait 20 minutes. And the water that I added to the apples on the stovetop just provides steam in the apples to help the apples cook evenly. This is the mashing technique that I'm using. I'm using potato masher and just kind of mashing together. And then after this, I'm gonna add in the salt, cinnamon, and brown sugar into this mixture and get started on the one with the pears. And this is what the applesauce is looking like after I added in the brown sugar, salt, and cinnamon. It is looking a lot browner. I wonder if it will be, yeah. And these are the, I did half apples, half pears, so 2.5 pears, 2.5 apples, and this is what they're looking like. With both the applesauces, I didn't pay too much attention to the wedges because they're gonna be mashed up. And yeah, I've already put 3 tablespoons of water in here, and I will cover it and let it simmer on, or let it sit on medium low for 20 minutes. And I'm using the same mashing technique for the applesauce with the pears. And this is the applesauce with the pears after I've added in the other ingredients and mashed it up really well. It looks about the same color to me as the other one, so that is partly due to the brown sugar maybe overpowering it, I think. The pectins that hold the fruit, in this case apples and pears too, that hold the structure together, loosen up and provide not as much support when they're heated up, and that is what causes them to soften. Also, when these apples are being heated up, they are losing water and becoming much more mushier and much more limp than they were. And you can definitely tell a big difference between how after the apples are cooked and then before the apples are cooked, or just a normal apple. And I'm about to start cooking the normal version of the apple wedges. So the thickness is about this size. Try to make them pretty even. And I will be adding the brown sugar in, as well as in a little cinnamon, and then covering it and cooking it on medium-low for 15 minutes. And these are the apples before they're cooked for 15 minutes. These are the apple slices. I've already stirred in the butter and the salt, but they look really nice, and I'm going to set them aside and then get started on the ones where I add the sugar after the cooking. In the applesauce, the brown sugar, salt, cinnamon, and butter are mostly there just for flavoring, although in the apple wedges, adding the brown sugar before helps preserve the insoluble pectin that keeps the apple together and prevents the apple from being mushy and leads it to be more crispy. Also, the crispiness in the apple wedges is because of calcium that contains brown sugar. And this is because the brown sugar, or the calcium in the brown sugar, reacts with the reacts with the pectin substances to create insoluble compounds that don't dissolve as quickly, or don't dissolve. And they lose so much out of that water because of the pectin substances. The pectin substances turn into pectins and don't provide structure for the cells, and the cells are dying, so the apple releases that water. And the strength between the cells, the pectins, is weakened by the heat and dissolves when converted to pectin, and then the cells start to separate. They rupture, leak, and lose water. So when I tasted the applesauce, I did notice a very big difference in between both of the two, the applesauce and then the applesauce with the pears. I mainly noticed a taste difference and then also a texture difference because the pears didn't mix as well with the apples, and they were also mushier, so you could tell that there was two things in there versus just one. The pear one had slightly more liquid was more liquidier. It still had an applesauce consistency, but it was more liquidier. And I noticed a very, very slight difference in between the apple wedges with the sugar added before and then the apple wedges with the sugar added after, but it was such a tiny difference that my family could tell, but they said it was a really small difference too. And also my brother said that it had more of a cinnamon. It tasted more like cinnamon, so maybe the flavors with the cinnamon really got mixed up before cooking. Overall, I had a very successful experiment, especially in the applesauce. I might have seen a starker difference in my apple wedges. Maybe I would have seen a starker difference in my brown sugar if I had used more brown sugar to strengthen that effect. But either way, I still did see a small difference. Some experiments that would be interesting to see, I think, is obviously experimenting with different fruits would be interesting. maybe one with all pears and one with all apples, or some with peaches or strawberries, so many other things. Although I think with strawberries you would have a really highly watery applesauce. I noticed that with the pears, I think because pears have a higher water content, and so I think the ones with strawberries would have a really watery texture that you might be hard to get rid of. And then I also think it'd be interesting to play with the amount of sugar. We played with when the sugar was introduced, but maybe the amount of sugar also affects the crispiness effect of the apple wedges. And also, I think it would be interesting to see how the flavor is changed with different apples, of course, I think. And also, maybe the same kinds of apples, just from different points of when they were picked. Maybe an apple that's fresher versus an apple you got at the store, or even because freshness contributes to the flavor of the apple. So I think that the fresher apples would taste better. Overall, I had a successful experiment, and thank you for watching.